Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting of January 28th. Tonight we'll be interviewing two finalists, candidates for the position of fire chief in the town of Hatfield. One of our candidates is here already, but before we start our interview, I just wanted to take a moment to thank our screening committee, Chief Mike DeKoschak, Chief Spank Nabel from Hadley, Luke Longstreet from the Hatfield Fire Department, David Keir and Chris Hoffman, who are representatives from the town. So I wanted to thank them for their time and efforts they've put in going through the process, interviewing candidates, and bringing the finalists to us tonight. I also wanted to go on record to say that there were four finalists, or four candidates that the screening committee had recommended to come to the board. Two of those gentlemen have subsequently dropped out. So there'll be two candidates that we interview tonight for the position. So did either of you have anything to say? Did I get all that?
Just about the time frame.
Okay. We've allotted 45 minutes for each candidate. There are 14 questions that we'd like to ask. Some of them build upon the previous one and others throughout the list. These are different questions, although from what the screening committee used. We didn't see their questions. We didn't see the responses from the candidates. So I just wanted to go on record as stating that. So at this time, I'd like to introduce William Choate, who is one of the finalists for the Hatfield fire chief position. So welcome, William.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. Thank you for your interest in the town of Hatfield.
Thanks for having me.
I have the first question that I'll ask, and then we'll skip around and take turns just asking the question for no particular reason other than to have something to say, I guess.
We should make sure we allot time because this took a little time.
I'm sorry?
That we give them a few extra minutes because
Yeah, because that took, yep, I agree.
If
Thank
necessary.
You. Yep. So the first question we would ask is, please tell us a little bit about yourself, including what attracts you to the fire chief position in Hatfield and how it fits into your professional goals.
A little bit about myself. I'm married, father of four, grandfather of six. Glad to have them in my life. They're fulfilling. As far as professionally, 25 years in the emergency services field. Currently serving the community of West Bridgewater. As a senior lieutenant, third in command of the department, also the ALS coordinator for 10 years. What attracts me to the position is the fact that it is a small department, call department. I enjoy that call atmosphere. When I first started, we had a more of a presence on the fire department we're in now. Now they're a smaller presence as a combined department. There's a dedication in a call service that you don't see in the career department. When the bell rings at 2 o'clock in the morning or the phone rings, these people are getting out of bed and coming down here. They're not doing it as a 9-to-5 job. I've worked my way professionally up to the point where I could compete for this position, and look forward to that. A little bit about my professional career, as far as my training, education, and experience. My training, as you can see from my CV, it's pretty lengthy.
Yes.
I really enjoy the educational and training aspect of the job. I believe that's a big part of the job. I utilize the Mass Fire Academy, National Fire Academy, MEMA, and FEMA for professional education development. I just recently graduated last year from the CFO program, which is the capstone of the Mass Fire Academy. It's through the George Collins administrative branch of UMass, and it was really good. It taught me a lot more than I would get normally from the passing down and mentorships that you'd be involved with. As far as my education, I chose a degree in business administration because I think the fire department really is is moving towards a more business approach to operations with budgeting and the complex human resources now, finance and budgeting and fiscal stuff. And then with my experiences as far as through my careers, I've worked for, I've been an employer, I've been an employee, I've owned a business, I've worked for union shops, I've worked for non-union shops, so I've really got a good background of how everything works, both in the public and private sectors. So I think those types of things really build on my whole career.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. Could you please describe your leadership style and how you will go about quickly establishing your credibility as chief in Hatfield? And also please describe how you would select the firefighters to serve in officer positions.
My leadership style, I would say, is a situational type. There's autocratic, democratic. You can go through all that. A chief on scene has to be, autocratic. There's orders that have to be followed. But in the running of the fire department, I think a lot of it has to be everybody doesn't operate at the same level. So some people will need to be coached. Some people will need to be just given a directive and they can go about their own. So that's how I base my leadership style on what the need of the individual or what the situation may be. The second part, I'm sorry.
How would you go about selecting the firefighters to serve in officer positions?
I think that really has to be based on a merit type system. Just through a transitional or a acquired, just the next person in line, doesn't really develop somebody into the officer that they should be. I think a lot of people need to understand that you have to have some type of succession planning in there as well. So you're developing those individuals to move into that position so they can perform it effectively.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I want to thank you for applying. The next question is sort of like another two-part question. So, Hatfield Fire is a volunteer department. What ideas do you have for recruiting and retaining volunteers and building a team? And what do you see as the role of the chief in a volunteer department like Hatfield's?
Recruitment retention is something that's been, the issues with it have been plaguing the country pretty much since the 1980s. Nobody has a magic bullet. There's no magic dust that will make it go away. I think you have to be very proactive. Nowadays, it's the days of waiting for somebody to show up to join the department are gone. Those people are very busy now. People have lives. They have lives outside of their work schedules as well. So I think it's something that really you have to be proactive about. But I think you really have to build a brand within the department, so people recognize the department as a great place to work, a great place to volunteer, and have their be able to do their civic duty. As far as some of the things that you could do, you really have to attach to the youth. That doesn't mean that there isn't a place for older citizens. There's always a role for somebody to do something within the fire department. I think you really need to get the commercial portion of town, the aggie and the commercial portion of town. There's a call department close to where I am that is very big in cranberries, and they're a great department. They have a huge department, 78 people in the department, and they have waiting lists for people to come in. And I think it's all built by the way the chief communicates his needs and such like that. So that would be the model that I would follow, with something with his. And I'm sorry, the second part of that is.
What do you see as the role of chief in a volunteer department like Hatfield's?
The role of the chief is, to administer the human and the financial and the physical resources of the department, to maintain, operational readiness, to maintain the safety of the department, and make sure that the risks in the community are managed and handled. But I think it goes beyond that. As far as in a volunteer department, I think you have to be their advocate. You have to be their voice piece. You have to be able to develop that department through mentorships and such like that. It's just something where a chief just can't show up and just expect the department to run itself. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Michael, so effective leaders build relationships with people to get things done. What strategies have you found effective in building and leveraging networks, both within your organization and within your colleagues in other communities, as well as state agencies?
I think it's building relationships. It's getting out there, shaking hands, getting people to understand who you are, what you have to offer, and what they can offer you. Like I said, you just can't sit behind the desk and expect, when something's needed or that type of relationship that has to be developed to just, happen in a vacuum. Like I said, getting out and making sure that you understand the needs and they understand your needs and stuff. That's the best way to build those type of relationships.
Okay, I actually have a couple of follow-ups to that, if you don't mind. So along those same lines. So how might you build relationships with other town departments that respond to emergencies, such as the police and emergency planning and the DPW? That's one part. And the other would be the same type of question, but with other departments such as schools and the Council on Aging and Housing Authority. So I think we're trying to get a feel for, what do you think would be the way to go about interacting and building relationships with other departments within the town itself?
I think that's very important. Sharing resources. We all can't have our own resources anymore. The limited tax dollars doesn't allow that anymore. So I think you really need to look to that other department, that other organization, in utilizing that type of resource sharing. It's all about, like I said, relationships and communications. It's knocking on the door, not hiding behind your desk, and getting in there and figuring out, what both needs are, So, and same with the school department, getting in and being almost like a resource officer for the fire department with fire safety, and, taking some time out in the morning and shaking the kids' hands as they walk into the school to build relationships with the kids as well. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's a very big thing in Hatfield, actually.
Oh, is it? Yeah. I know.
We're having somebody kind of at the front door, even at the high school. So it's grade 7 through 12 is the high school, middle school, high school combined. But there's always somebody, a faculty member at the front door every morning as the kids come in.
Just introducing.
And just to be seen and welcoming.
And fire safety courses at the elementary school level.
Yes, right.
Yeah, the PFAS and stuff. Yeah, it's.
Yep.
I think that's a big building that type of relationship with the school system. We had a deputy that has since retired, but he was extremely involved in soccer. But he was the public fire life safety officer, and every kid in town knew him, and all the way up to in their 30s, people knew him because they all went through his class, through his career, and that was a great relationship builder. So.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Right. Employee morale is very important in any town department, but particularly so in a fire department. Please describe how you would approach morale issues should they arise.
I think having expectations and accountability systems in place is something that really is a way to not only build morale but maintain it. Having open lines of communication is probably the biggest. Getting people involved will decrease the morale issues, any type of negative morale issues. Another fire department that I mentored with the chief, he's big on communications, and he communicates everything. He has a letter at the end of the week, because it's a call department. The guys aren't in there all the time, so there could be a 2-week period between when somebody shows up from one call and the next one, and a lot happens in 2 weeks. So he constantly has emails going out. He constantly has these Friday, sit-down letters that just explains what's been going on, whether, Joe's wife had a baby or the tire on the engine got changed. People know when they come in the next time, and they're in each other's, lives, and they understand, what's going on. So it's a good way to keep morale going.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you're going to have to follow me on this next question. It's sort of a long one in a way. Okay. Training is critically important, part of a well-prepared volunteer department. Hatfield Fire currently holds a voluntary training session every Thursday night. While in this small town, we have mountains, forests for search and rescue operations. We have several bodies of water, including the Hatfield Pond, the Mill River, and of course the Connecticut River, where the Hatfield Fire has been called upon to do water rescues, as well as requiring response to flood emergencies. We have an interstate highway. We have train tracks. We have freight and passenger rail. And while we are predominantly a residential community, we are home to many very large commercial buildings. So the question is sort of, please describe your experience with formulating training programs that will ensure that our volunteer firefighters are completely prepared to react to any emergency.
As the AOS coordinator, EMS officer, training was a big part of my thing. And you know, as a shift commander, it's daily training. I sat down and really went through trying to figure out a 52-week training schedule for my guys that we do every rotation that we work. But a good way for a volunteer department, and a lot of guys won't be able to, a lot of guys and gals won't be able to make you know, every single Thursday night meeting. So years ago, I went to the chief and I said, you know, to standardize training, I think it would be a good idea to get a computer-based and web-based Sentinel. There's a couple other different ones. That's just the one that I thought was the best. And it was able to knock off a lot of the training on their own time, whether they were at home or they could do it at the station or however they want to do it. And you know, the didactic portion of the training was all done online. They were graded at the end, they were quizzed at the end, and then they were able to come, and a lot of the hands-on training was able to, you know, there wasn't a lot of classroom time that had to be covered, just recapping it, and then they had a lot of the practical hands-on training. And that kind of opened up the training a lot, so people, so we could do more with less. So that's, you know, you're just utilizing technology in the training part of it, and it's worked out great since. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if you could, would you please describe your experience with respect to the apparatus, vehicle, equipment, facilities management type thing? And can you please explain how you view the role of a chief in making sure the fire department equipment and facilities are properly maintained and cleaned and replaced and upgraded as necessary in a responsible manner? So
Yeah, I mean, maintenance is a huge part of it. It's better to have a maintenance budget than a repair budget. You know, repair budgets are usually twice as big as maintenance budget. But I think having some type of, you know, computer software, TAC3 or something like that, or that, like I said, there's numerous ones that kind of track the inventory. You know, you're going to know what you have, and you're going to know what you need to maintain. You're going to know when it needs to be maintained and when it was maintained. And I think having that type of system in place, like I said, makes repair budgets a lot smaller than having that. You know, it's scheduling different groups, or I'm not sure exactly how the structure is, but you know, maintaining the equipment after use, periodic maintenance. Like I said, having a barcode system to make sure that you know you know when the equipment came in, you know that it's been maintained throughout its career. I think it will last a lot longer, and you don't have to take hits on capital and stuff like that because of it. You know, a fire engine is rated for 20 years, but I've been into some departments that it's brand, you know, it could be 15 years old and still be brand new. And other departments you go in because it's not maintained, it's just not waxed. You know, they look like they're 25 years old and they only got 7 to 10 years on them. So, I believe in strong maintenance. You know, accountability is a good thing.
great, thank you.
Great, very good. Could you please describe your experience with respect to fire code inspection and code enforcement?
As you can see, I've in my CV that I have, you know, all the way through all the certifications for that. I do a lot of code enforcement now with my department. Each shift commander is responsible for whatever inspections and code enforcement has to be done during the day. The deputy of the department does more of the bigger stuff, but gets us involved so we understand the buildings as we go along.
Hatfield has somewhat recently elevated its ambulance service to paramedic level. It is critically important to this board that we are able to provide the most effective emergency response to our residents. Please describe how you will ensure rapid ambulance response with a volunteer department.
Part of the discussion with the screening committee had a question similar to that, and it kind of evolved into a more of a discussion about the ambulance. I understand you have a brand new one coming, and one of the things was that they said that there was a lot of missed calls, like maybe 50% of the calls have been missed, and other towns have had to come in. I was kind of stewing on that on the past week or so, trying to figure out what could be done. There's a town, Sherborne, that is pretty much the same type of model call department that you have, where they have an ambulance, and they have an ambulance system that's run, or the division is run by part-time employees, and I think that these missed calls or late calls, they don't really have to happen here. If you started if you had part-time EMTs that work, say, to 6 to 6 at night, 5 days a week, that would cover that missed time that they were talking about, and that I think it was 124 calls or something like that they were saying that was missed. At a BLS rate, transport rate, that's $1,000 at a minimum. So that's $124,000. You knock 20% off of that for uncollectability, and if it costs, say, $90,000 to have these part-time EMTs working 19 hours a week, so it doesn't incur any benefit packages through the Fair Labor Standard Tax, you've got it covered, just by being able to meet those calls. Then you have that truck go out the door from 6 at night to 6 in the morning, 6 at night. Throughout the door is expedient response. You could be meeting national standards at that point. And, I also understand that the chief now runs with the ambulance because of that. That would leave the chief to be able to do chief jobs, to do the job of the chief, getting out, with the recruitment and retention meetings, shaking hands, and developing the department. So, I don't know if that made sense to you or not. Yeah. So it's a kind of rough numbers, but
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you please describe any experience you may have with fire and/or accident investigation?
I have my my fire investigators cert.
Yeah, saw that.
And that's usually handled in our department by the chief and the deputy. But it's something that's something that I'm attuned to. The fire marshal's office is always available for any type of investigation. But a lot of what they teach you in that arson investigation course is all the preliminary stuff. Is knowing when it could be, different signs and symptoms that might be the cause of the fire. So it's staying in tune with that stuff. Sure. But I don't have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Do you happen to have any with actual like accident investigations? I'm guessing like car accidents.
Motor vehicle accidents.
Motor vehicle.
No, that's usually
different.
That's the police and state police. We have 24 Route 24 that runs through.
Yeah, understood. It's a different kind of.
And that's the race.
On that
the Massachusetts. Yeah, take your life in your hand driving on that road. So yeah, that's all handled.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. Thank you.
We're about to embark on budget season in Hatfield. Please describe in detail the experience you have with developing a budget and then working within it, and include your experience with capital planning.
That's usually the chief's job in our department as the ALS coordinator and EMS coordinator. I had a small budget that I used to run, but more of my budgeting in finance comes from the businesses that I've had, and I very active in my church, and it's a 501c. And part of the junior and senior warden's job is being part of the budget and finance committee. If that hasn't taught me something, I don't know what will, because taxes you can levy, you're always going to get your money somehow. In that type of environment, it's all tithe and pledging. So you're trying to run a budget based on what somebody says they're going to donate or pledge. And it usually comes down to pennies and nickels. So it's really, having to operate very efficiently and stuff. And that's really what I do is when it comes down to the budgeting, I mean, you really have to, strategically forecast and plan and make sure that you're being fiscally responsible, making sure that your resources are strategically allocated and that you operate efficiently. So I think that's the big thing about budgeting. As far as capital, I don't have a lot of experience with capital. I do understand that it is a process, but it's not. I've never had to produce something for that. But I have great resources that I can fall back on if something was needed. So,
if I could just ask another follow-up question to that, just out of curiosity, really. So, does either your West Bridgewater or where you live, which I don't think is West Bridgewater. You don't have to say what it is.
Lakeville,
okay,
yeah.
Okay, you can say it. Do they use town meeting at all, or is
it's both town.
Oh, they're both.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're
Understand that.
so you're
Yes.
familiar with it. That's really kind of where I
Very,
was
yeah.
going.
I mean, I've had to sit with the chief a few times to explain at Capitol, different things when we were going for new monitors for the ambulance and different things for the ambulance. He would have me come in and give my expertise on it. So I understand the process of it. So
Good. I just wanted to
yeah.
see if you had any experience.
Yeah.
in meetings.
Yeah, I've never really had to produce, do the whole thing, but it's
Sure.
I've sat before the finance
all-
committee
what
and
it's all
tried to
about. Yeah.
try to let them understand the urgency of the
Sure.
need for it. So
Okay. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that.
How will you recognize if you have a firefighter who may be struggling with emotional difficulties after an incident, and how will you deal with their needs?
I like I said, I run a shift, and I have the best guys. I have three. There's three of them, and it's very open. We understand that if we have a problem, we can go to each other, and I think that's the big thing. I think it's having those open lines of communication and knowing somebody enough that you can recognize the fact that there may be an issue. We've had a couple of horrendous calls in the past years I've been doing this that we had to have the critical stress teams come out, and they're good so far. But you really have to be able to monitor and understand, human nature and human interaction to understand that there may be an issue, going down the road. And it's being able to have that relationship, to be able to approach them and then feel comfortable with you enough to, that they can open up to you so you can find that help they need. So.
Great. Thank you. So the position is advertised. It's for a 40 hours per week position with the expectation that the chief will work a traditional work week. How will you balance that with any other obligations you may have professionally?
As far as
Well, if you had other obligations,
If
you would mention how you would a business owner, previous business, if you were also doing something like that, do you have an idea how you would manage basically having two jobs? I guess is kind of the question, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, life is balance. I mean, you have to be able to balance that thing. I mean, your priority is your main job, which would be the fire chief. Living and eating the fire chief's job isn't healthy. So you do need to have extra balance. I'm an avid auto restorer. I've restored many cars. I have a small business now doing it, but it's something that someone will come to me and say, hey, listen, you want to take this project on? At the time, if I have the time, I do it. But you got to find that balance, and like I said, it's, the fire chief job is the one that takes precedence over everything. You have to drop what you're doing to go in because there's an incident, then that's what you have to do. So you got to find that balance.
Great.
Thank
Last question.
Wow.
Is there
that went
anything
quick.
else you would like to share with us, or do you have any questions for us?
Not really. I think I'd like to thank you first for inviting me. I think my resume and the cover letter kind of speaks for who I am and what I can do. I'm very organized, very articulate as far as that stuff goes. I'm a go-getter. Really, I don't know what else more to say other than what's been said and what's in that package. So again, like I said, I appreciate the invitation.
Well, thank you for being
Yes,
here.
we thank you for coming.
We appreciate it, and speaking for my colleagues, but we know it was a trek, and your background and your resume is very impressive.
Thank you.
And so thank you for sharing that with us. Did Ed or Diana, did you have any last minute
I think they
questions
covered
or
everything
anything?
we anticipated covering.
Okay. Marlene, is there anything you wanted to? All right. So you sure you have nothing for us, William?
No, not today. Those are pretty. Those pretty much covered everything that you
Yeah.
really want to say.
I hope so. We try to allow the candidates, we sort of go in not different directions, but different pieces of what we think with paramedics and fire chiefs, what their experiences are and what their expectations are and what their visions are. And so that's why
There's one thing as far as the succession through the next chief. Is there any plans for the succession? Or is it? I know the current chief is retiring from the position.
Right.
Is he going to be around, or is it something that?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So-
Yes.
Yes, so-
Very willing to assist with the transition.
Yeah, and has suggested that he might stay in a fashion of just a firefighter / paramedic on the force, not leave the force completely, but leave the chief's role.
Right, he's not
So-
actually retiring.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so he's
He's
just
yes.
stepping back.
Correct.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And very willing to assist whoever the next chief is and help them. To your point, kind of get up and running and learn the ins and
Yeah,
outs
that's
of
probably-
every department's.
Yeah.
Right, the job is often similar, but
Yeah.
the ins and outs of every community and department are different, I would imagine. So
They say that most fire departments are the same. It's just the sign up front that changes.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I always agree with that. So every department has its own little
Right.
uniqueness
Sure.
to it and the way they run. It's you can learn a lot from another department. So
yeah, I would imagine that's especially true in a small town fire department.
some of the different
versus
ways.
the large. Yeah.
Some of the different ways towns run. It's like that. You hear about these things, or you go to visit other departments, and they'll say, you look at it and go, I don't think that would ever work in that town. But that's what works for
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
And it probably would work in that town. It's just that's not the way,
Right.
it's been done,
Yep.
Well, in the questions, we really wanted to make sure that we could really get to the heart of your experience and everything, so that for townspeople who will watch this
Yeah.
Right.
as well. So
Great.
we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. Okay, so we are all set, if you're all set. We plan on meeting no later than tomorrow to, have a discussion, and so Marlene and/or I probably give you a buzz on Friday or tomorrow night or
Okay, yeah.
Thursday, or if that, if that's convenient for you.
Yeah, no, that's
We have all your contact information,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, I got rid of our home phone. I asked my wife the other night. I said, when was the last time we used the house phone? And she couldn't remember. So
Okay, well,
so she was going through, and she ended up getting rid of the house phone. And when she was rearranging some of the stuff with the FiOS, I was like, what are we paying for that for? So it's So, but my cell phone is still, yeah,
I'm
we
a
just
former
use that.
Verizon employee.
Oh, yeah, I'm
so
sorry.
I have three
Yeah,
landlines
yeah.
at my. No, I am. I won't hold it against you though.
All I said is, can we still dial 911 from it? That's the
Right.
only reason I had it begin, so I guess you can do that.
Right.
Still.
Well, how long have you been a firefighter?
25 years. 20 years. I had 25 years.
So I know some in the audience will remember this, but I remember when I first started my career with Verizon, they had red and blue networks
Yeah.
in all the small communities. There was no 911.
Yeah.
You called that special
Yeah.
7-digit, and it rang in
Rang into
10
the-
different houses or something.
Yeah, we had
The
that in
red,
West
red
Bridgewater.
network.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the phone would ring,
Yeah.
so somebody picked
Didn't
it
they
up.
always end in
Yeah.
1515 or
Yeah.
1212?
Yeah, we did 3232.
Yeah.
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 So it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, so that's
dating myself.
That's reaching back there. Yeah.
Thank you again. We appreciate you being here.
Still hooked up.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Our next candidate for the fire chief's position in the town of Hatfield is Robert Flaherty of Primrose Path. So, Bob, thank you very much for being here. We have a list of 14 questions that we'd like to ask you. We have about 45-minute time frame to have the conversation and the interview. So,
Sounds great.
okay. So, are you all set?
I'm ready to go.
All right. So the first question is if you could just tell us about yourself, including what attracts you to the fire chief position in Hatfield and how it fits into your professional goals.
So what attracted me is that, as a lot of people know, I'm currently one of the deputy chiefs here. I've been on the department for 18 years. So that's my total time in the fire service. I've been a full-time firefighter with Amherst for just over 10. And as far as what attracts me is I'm looking for another challenge. It's a little bit hard to get promoted in the current full-time job that I'm working. So looking for a new challenge and seeing what else I can bring forward to the department and build on the previous couple of chiefs that we've had and see if we can move the department forward even more.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks. Please describe your leadership style and how you will go about quickly establishing your credibility as chief in Hatfield. And also, please describe how you would select the firefighters to serve in officer positions.
So as far as picking who we get for firefighters, I'm already working on a recruiting technique right now.
I mean, for officers.
For officers?
Yeah.
For officers,
That question comes up later.
okay. So for the officers, we actually have a process in place already. So we will post it internally, usually for a 30-day process, and then we will do an interview. Usually the senior officers, so whether it be the chief or the deputy chiefs, will take care of doing the interview process. And we do a scoring system very similar to a lot of other interview process, and then basically rate the candidates based off of that and determine what positions need to be filled. With the slight changing in the department potentially, there will be some reorganization, so that's something that's going to come up relatively quick. We still currently have a vacant captain's position as it is, so we know that that's one that's going to have to be done relatively quickly, so we can keep moving forward.
The first part was describe your leadership style.
And then my leadership, some of the members of the department, they think I'm kind of hard to them. Most of the reason why I do it is because I realize that it puts the department, the town, and then the individual firefighters at risk if we don't hold them to high standards. I'm fully aware that it is a call volunteer department. It's not full-time. Everybody has their own jobs and their own lives. But realizing that regardless of full-time or part-time, we still have to meet certain minimum state and federal standards. So I still hold them to that, as I do now in a couple of my other roles that I do here. And I would continue to do that into the future. So making sure that we cover the basis, we make sure that everybody is protected from injuries, death, and ultimately for lawsuits to the individuals and then to the department. Going along with the leadership, we need to realize that this isn't everybody's full-time job. We're currently, my career is in the fire service. So you need to make accommodations that if somebody says I can't make drill or why they couldn't make some calls, you have to understand that, they're working 40 plus hours a week or they're in school and working. So you need to be able to work around that. My biggest thing is communication. If you're not going to be around for a little while, just give me a heads up, and then I know why you're not coming around and not just kind of walking away, basically. gives me a little bit of insight.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks. Thank you.
Next question is sort of two parts. So, Hatfield is a volunteer department. What ideas do you have for recruiting and retaining volunteers and building a team? And what do you see as the role of chief in a volunteer department like Hatfield's?
So as far as the recruiting, I mentioned before, I've already started working. The plan currently is to do a mass mailer to see what interests there are. Right now, I don't think anybody on the department, the 24 or 25 of us that are currently on, I don't think anybody knows exactly where all the potentials are in town. So the best way to do that is to send out a card as a mass mailer and see what kind of interest there is to be able to bring them in. I've recently found out, and this is actually one of the first years that they've done it under the SAFER grant, you're actually able to use SAFER grant money for recruiting and retention specifically to call volunteer. It used to be that it was only for full-time departments to pay for full-time staff. So I've already looked into that avenue to be able to try to use some of those funds if we were fortunate enough to get them to bring some new people in, be able to pay for training, which, you know, for being a call volunteer, people are always looking at, well, what's more time away from my family or my job? So if we were able to compensate them for that time away from those things, it goes a long way in building the rest of the department moving forward.
Thank you.
Could I just, so also I think the other part of that question was, what do you see the role of a chief in a volunteer department like Hatfield?
So a lot of what we do is realizing that it is a lot of administrative work, and especially in this particular position because it is in charge of the fire department and the ambulance. In this particular instance, the fire chief is also an operational chief and is not just an administrative chief, but they have to wear both hats in it. And being that it is a small department and it's a small community, you have to be willing to work with the members that you have and listen to them when they're giving you advice. You know, as I get a little bit older, I'm not necessarily in with the same crowds that I was when I first moved to town. So other people are learning and hearing different things, and you need to be able to take that in as the fire chief and process it and use it to your advantage with that information to move the department forward and then move the town forward as a whole.
Great, thank you. All right, this question's a little lengthy, but just a heads up.
Okay.
So it's really just, it's not that bad, but effective leaders build relationships with people to get things done. What strategies have you found effective in building and leveraging networks both within your organization and with your colleagues in other communities as well as state agencies?
As far as the department goes, it's really talking to them, listening to them, so it's building that bond and trying to understand, you know, when I might come forward with something and for a reason why we have to do it, and I kind of hear the grumbling about it, being able to understand their side and why they're upset with me about why I'm forcing them to do something, but even though it's a requirement. So you have to work with them to create that bond to make sure that they understand where you're coming from, you know, the legal side of things and what we are required to do, but then also understand where they're coming from is that, you know, it's a huge time commitment and being able to work within the confines of the department. As far as other agencies within town or even, you know, residents or other state agencies, is working with them, whether it be for different types of plans, emergency management plans, statewide mobilization plans, and making sure that the information typically stays up to date is also helpful. Instead of them constantly be hagging us for that type of information. If you could stay ahead of it, it keeps a much better relationship. And if there's an issue, reaching out very early on and making sure that you're proactive instead of becoming reactive in a lot of these things. And it makes it a lot easier to deal with these agencies when you're out front and open with them at the beginning.
The second part and or third part, and I think you alluded to it, so my apologies, but we're going through the process and being fair to everyone. So the first part of this next two-part is please discuss how you would build relationships with other town departments, and respond to emergencies town departments and respond to emergencies such as police, emergency planning, and the Department of Public Works. You know, What would be the process for building relationships with those particular?
Sitting down with each of those department heads, I do currently work with each of them in different various roles between going to calls, working on some other emergency plans and things like that. The police chief and I have talked recently over the last 6 months, active shooter drills and things like that they're putting on, and they want to bring us into that. So being able to work together as a department and making sure that you're communicating ahead of time for these things to make sure that you're prepared is huge. DPW, we work with them a lot in realizing that a lot of what we do is based off of the water distribution system in town. So if there is a water main break, that can affect us if we get a call for that particular area of town. So making sure that we communicate to make sure that we are aware of these issues that might arise. And then if we have any issues that, we break a water main or a valve or things, you have to be able to have a good working relationship with the water department in this case, and then ultimately the DPW director to make sure that you can have that good communication so things will stay cohesive and continue to work.
Great. I swear this is the last part of this question. And along those lines, could you just discuss a little bit how you would build important community relationships with other departments, such as the schools, COA, and the Housing Authority?
Sure. So specifically with the schools, I was doing it last year when I was on my shifts here in town. I was getting in typically once every other week, every couple of weeks, and going in and sitting with the students and having lunch with them. So we were kind of getting that presence, and they realized that we are not scary people as the firefighters and EMTs and paramedics. And that seemed to go a long way. I got a lot of questions about, well, why are you here first? And then the follow-up question is that, well, what do you do? Because I think the general public doesn't necessarily know what we do. They see us that, well, we drive around in the big red trucks and we make a lot of noise and there's lights. But realizing that, making sure that the kids and the teachers understand what we do. Unfortunately, we haven't been in the schools the last couple of years, specifically with SAFE. There's been some issues just trying to get in there, timing-wise more than anything with MCAS. So we're working on a new program to shorten our program to get in specifically to the schools. With the Council on Aging, prior to the former director retiring, I worked with her to actually take over the house numbering sign project. It became a lot for her because she had so many other things that she was doing to try to help with the seniors. So I kind of took that over for the last 2 years of putting all those signs out. So working with them, we try to send them in newsletters. We work hand in hand with the police and Council on Aging as part of Triad to put up the lock boxes for the elderly or anybody that needs them. And it's the same for the house numbering signs. We will do them for anybody, but we are kind of targeting the elderly audience in that particular case. So we're working with the Council on Aging. As far as dealing with the Housing Authority, it's getting into, in this case, across the street at Capewalk a little bit more. We found a few things and we're looking to do some pre-plan training over there. We haven't done it, at least in the 18 years that I've been here. Really what is going to be our best tactic to get in. So working with the new director there and the residents to formulate a good plan and understanding that right now they don't all leave their homes when the main alarm goes off. So we got to work with them to make sure that they're out of their homes so they're safe.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Employee morale is very important in any town department, but particularly so in the fire department. Please describe how you would approach morale issues should they arise.
Me personally, I feel right now we've had some issues with not a lot of people coming to drills, not a lot of people coming to calls. Everybody has their own thing. Some people have multiple jobs, so that becomes part of it. It also could be a little bit of a morale issue, is that they're not, at least over the last few months, they're kind of waiting to see what their process takes, because obviously the chief is resigning, and to see who the new person is. Dealing with that is bringing them in and talk. I did send out a department-wide email a few months ago just expressing, hey, here's some of my plans, so everybody's aware of what may take place if I were fortunate enough to be offered the position. And some of the members reached back out to me and said, I really appreciate that you did that. And I've noticed even in the last couple of weeks, since I did send that email, the folks coming to drill and folks coming to calls has increased. So I think that helps by having open communication with them and letting them play their side to me or whoever the chief is, and then being able to listen to that and build off of that. Because a few of the things that came out of that email, I worked on, I changed a few things, and it seems to be bringing those folks back. So I think the open communication is probably the biggest thing to keeping them involved and giving them something that they like doing as well. So.
Okay, this is sort of a long one, so bear with me, all right? Training is critically important part of a well-prepared volunteer department. Hatfield Fire currently holds a voluntary training session every Thursday night. While this is a small town, we do have mountains and forests that lead to search and rescue operations, as well as forest fires and brush fires, several bodies of water, including Hatfield Pond, the Mill River, and of course the Connecticut River, where Hatfield Fire has been called upon to do water rescues, as well as requiring response to flood emergencies, and interstate highway, as well as train tracks that carry both freight and passenger rail. And while we are predominantly a residential community, we are home to many very large commercial buildings. Now, so can you sort of describe your experience with formulating training programs that will ensure that our volunteer firefighters are completely prepared to react to any emergency?
So I've been fortunate enough that I've been the training officer for finishing up about 11 years now, so that is helpful. We work on a kind of a quarterly basis with most of our training, so whether or not we are going into any of the commercial properties, we work on motor vehicle accidents, which is a huge number of calls that we do handle in the course of a year. We usually do auto extrication twice a year, so we stay up on our skills, and we're constantly working with those. We actually this past Thursday, we were out and doing ice water rescue, cold water rescue, and that's something that is definitely an annual training that we always try to get in, provided there's a decent amount of ice to work off of to do that. So making sure that every member is prepared for each of those is a huge part of it, and because I've been in the position that I've been in for a while, we have all of those pieces in place of being able to deal with any type of water incident. Last summer, we were fortunate enough to be able to purchase an inflatable boat. So it gives us another option to be able to get out onto the water for any type of water emergencies. And whether it be the Connecticut River, the Great Pond, or any place else that if somebody were to go into the water, we now have extra tools. We can also work with our mutual aid partners who have boats, and we have in the past. We had an incident a few years ago. A car went into the water, and we worked hand in hand, and it was, they don't happen often, but it seems like we had trained on these every week for a year because it was seamless when we did these things. So working within the waterways, we have the equipment and we have the training that we're doing typically at least twice a year. The highways, dealing with car accidents, fluid spills, we do hazmat training at least 24 hours every year like we're required to, and we're dealing with the auto extrication practice and practicals typically at least twice a year as well. The commercial buildings, we try to get in once a year, every other year, sometimes depending on new personnel that might be arriving, and try to get into all the new buildings so we can see, or any of the buildings, so everybody gets a chance to see what is in them and what potential hazards are. And then working on the administrative side is dealing with some of the chemicals that these places are carrying, and that's part of the permitting process as well, because a lot of these are permitted items, so we need to go in and do annual inspections as well.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Great, thanks, Bob. Okay, could you please describe your experience with respect to apparatus, vehicle, equipment, facilities management? And can you please explain how you view the role of chief in making sure that the fire department equipment and facilities are properly maintained and cleaned and replaced and upgraded in a fiscally responsible manner?
Excuse me. So when we have any type of equipment or apparatus that are broken, they currently, right now, all of those items get reported to me. And if it's something that we can do in-house, that's on the fire trucks, we might take a look at it. We can change bulbs and lenses and things like that because they're really easy to do. Anything that we can't handle by changing a couple bulbs, I would refer that to the town mechanic to be able to deal with that, and that's something that I already do. As far as some of the other equipment, I handle most of the small engines. I also handle all of the SCBA. About 7 or 8 years ago, I got certified to do small repairs on all of our SCBA in town. So I'm one of a few people in the area that can actually work on them. I can't break them down entirely, but I can change out some of the smaller pieces and the things that break on a regular basis. And then dealing with those particular items is real easy. And I also work with a lot of vendors. So we come in every year, we do ladder testing, and I'm the contact point for those already when we have our SCBA, because we need to make sure that those are tested annually. I'm the one right now, because that was part of my role, or currently part of my role, is to contact those vendors that deal with those and make sure that those are taken care of so they stay operating. As far as the replacement of items in a fiscally responsible, I think we do a very good job. We look at, usually we create the 10-year capital plan that the town looks for, and then we would take that and we usually kind of break it down as that what are the next 3 years, and what is the priority within those to realize what we need. We were only just recently notified about 8 months ago that our current line of SCBA, or self-contained breathing apparatus, they plan on not supporting those in the next 2 to 2.5 years possibly. So that became a big thing that we weren't prepared for, and I don't think the town would be prepared for the dollars that are associated with that. But some of our other equipment, we've worked with capital improvement, and we've worked even with the DPW director and blended a couple of projects together to be able to get these items so the town can afford them, but we still get what we need to make sure that the department operates. The JAWS is a perfect example. We were able to work the numbers, get them as part of the same lease with the ambulance, and that was huge because our vendors told us, if you break the current set of JAWS that you had, we couldn't do any repair work to them. They were obsolete. So then it kind of left the citizens at a danger, or at least a delay, because now we're looking at calling either Northampton or South Deerfield for those types of pieces of equipment. So making sure that we try to stay at least 2 to 3 years ahead on any large purchases is the biggest part of it. And seeing what a lot of what we use has expiration dates. So making sure that we stay ahead of that. We've done it with our bottles for our breathing apparatus. They're only good for 15 years. We got a grant in 2004. We caught up to the fact that we need to start replacing them on a yearly basis instead of coming to the town and saying, we need another $75,000 to replace all these cylinders. Let's try to break it down on a year-to-year basis just out of the budget. And we've been able to do that at least for a year for the last 4 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you please describe your experience with respect to fire code inspection and code enforcement?
So in the fire inspection, I work with the current fire chief, and we go and do smoke and CO detector inspections anytime a home is for sale. I have worked with him on liquor license inspections, so those are an annual inspection. I have not had the opportunity to go with him on a lot of the other commercial properties in town. I do see the reports of who they are and what their permits are, but at this time I don't particularly work in that minefield. But as the rest of the inspection process goes, I have a little bit of training in fire inspection. I have my fire prevention basic course. Fire prevention 1 is a little bit harder to get into, so I haven't been able to over the last couple of years. I signed up for one and then they canceled it due to low enrollment. So as far as knowing what is in the code, I know what is there. But as far as what all the penalties are specific to each individual violation, I'll be honest, that I don't currently know. But it is relatively easy to look up, and that's actually part of what I'm working on for my degree right now.
Okay,
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Hatfield has somewhat recently elevated its ambulance service to paramedic level. It is critically important to this board that we are able to provide the most effective emergency response to our residents. Please describe how you will ensure rapid ambulance response with a volunteer department.
So right now, I believe the desire of the residents of town, and I believe the Board of Selectmen for the most part at this point, is that the new fire chief, whoever they may be, is generally a Monday through Friday position. They are 40 hours. Currently with the state OEMS, we are required to cover 8 hours a day. And there's a lot of times that we currently do cover more than that. Occasionally we don't because of the current chiefs and my schedule as 2 of the 3 paramedics on the department. But working with that, we do an on-call schedule with the 3rd paramedic as it is now. So if the chief or myself aren't available, the 3rd paramedic is in an on-call state, usually the 2 days that we aren't. And then beyond that, at least at the paramedic level, there's many days we have 24-hour coverage between the 3 of us. We are all off. Due to our rotating work schedules and our full-time jobs. And right now we have a very good group of EMT basics. So all of our ambulances could be staffed at 2 basics, 2 medics, or a basic and a paramedic. And we have a really good group right now of about 8 basics, and we're looking to put on a couple more in the very near future. They've filled out applications. We just need to get them into the fold. And that's actually going to give us more coverage on top of what we've already been doing. And for years, we've done an overnight on-call schedule. It's fallen off a little bit just because of people's work schedules in the last few months. But that is something that I'd look to try to re-implement if I were fortunate enough to get the job as a fire chief and covering that 10P to 6A, which is really tough for people to get up in the middle of the night. But
Thank you. Can you please describe any experience that you may have with fire and/or accident investigations?
So fire investigation, I've actually been fortunate enough, I took a basic and an advanced fire investigation class in the hopes of joining the fire investigation team in Amherst. A person that was senior to me ultimately got the position, but I still have the training. I still look at a lot of the modules that keep popping up in my email. I usually get 1 a week. So I have the basic knowledge to be able to do fire investigation. If it's a relatively easily known origin and cause, we do that either at the company level, so even a lieutenant or a captain can investigate those, or myself, I'd be able to go in and do a cause and origin to be able to fill out the report, because a lot of that has to do with the insurance for the homeowner or the business owner. They need that information. If it is something that's either a high dollar loss, injuries or fatalities, we are required to bring in the state fire marshal's office that's attached with the Mass State Police to bring them in to assist us with the investigation. And because of the dynamic we have here, not having any certified investigators, they would take the lead and we would work with them in investigating that. As far as accident reconstruction, I have taken one of the state police sergeants a number of years ago, put on a class for us as the first responders to kind of walk us through a little bit of what they want to see when they get there and what they want to make sure that we don't touch, because it's evidence to them. So I have that knowledge of, we need to do our job to get somebody out of a car or whatever the case may be, or out from under a vehicle. But I also understand the things that we need to make sure that we don't disturb, because it can change when the CARS unit from state police were to come in and investigate it if it was a fatality or significant injury. Mm-hmm. So that was a 3-hour class I had about 6 years ago. Okay. So I have the base knowledge for either or.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're about to embark on budget season in Hatfield.
Yes.
Please describe in detail the experience you have with developing a budget and then working within it, and also include your experience with capital planning.
As far as putting the budget together, the current chief typically puts, the last few years, he's put the budget together when we have our officers meetings. We kind of run through it line by line. The last few years, the town overall has kind of had a fairly strict budget. We've been relatively level funded. There was a year in that we were cut. So there wasn't a lot to change from year to year for those particular budgets. But looking at where money we've, as we look at the end of the year expenses, have we spent the money appropriately out of each line item or correctly out of each line item? And if there's line items that are consistently left with extra money in it, is there someplace better that we need to be able to move that towards, because we seem to always fall short? So looking at the overall budget, ours isn't a large budget in the grand scheme of the town, but we still need to make sure that we cover all of our operating costs and then salary. The salary for us, we've been fortunate enough that we have a set number of dollars for those. It's all based on calls and the number of people that are responding. So we always have to plan for kind of the worst case. And we've been fortunate enough to have some extra money the last few years in that particular line item that has been able to be turned back to the town, which I think is beneficial overall. And then on the operating side, we've worked, and I've worked with the chief on this, is to watch our expenses during the course of the year, that just because we have new money in July doesn't mean to go out and expend it right away. So we need to do the things that we need to do right off the bat because they're required. And then we kind of see what else happens during the course of the year. And then we look at, typically come April, May, June, are there other items now that we talked about earlier in the year that we would like, but we really needed to wait to make sure that we had the money? So setting the budgets, I haven't worked currently setting any budgets. I know what the line items are and I know the dollar amounts in them, but I haven't been available to work setting those budgets. As far as the capital improvement, the last few years, because I am the equipment person, I am generally the person that is getting all of the quotes from the vendors and the breakdowns and forwarding them on to the chief so he can fill out each of the, Schedule B or Schedule C or whatever the item is that we happen to be looking for, and putting those forward. I did sit in 2 years ago with the Capital Improvement Committee specific to the ambulance at that time. So I'm aware of what they're looking at, and it comes down to what is the money that's available when budget time comes. So I know how the process works, and I know that every time they look at it, they're looking for detailed numbers because they need to see what's a priority. They need to see the whole picture of the town, not just this department.
How will you recognize if you have a firefighter who may be struggling with emotional difficulties after an incident, and how will you deal with their needs?
So the big thing now is to make sure that you reach out. If you see that someone seems to be having an issue with a particular call or a multitude of calls, maybe it was a run of bad calls that you had, I think it's an incumbent upon the department is that you are supposed to try to do, at a bare minimum, a company debriefing based on the members that were on that call. And then if it seems like it's become a more systemic problem, maybe it's a multitude of calls, you need to do a department debriefing. That could be done just with in-house resources and everybody gets a chance to talk. You can also do it in the private sector, is that those individuals, you can bring them in and ask them what seems to be bothering you. I've noticed some changes in your behavior, or you haven't been coming to calls, and try to get the feedback of exactly why aren't you, what seems to be going on. And then if it doesn't work on the in-house side of it, either the individual or small group or the whole department, we ultimately, the town has the ability to outsource it to an employee assistance program if somebody needs to talk to a professional. In-house, we can handle so much, but we are not the professional psychologists and psychiatrists, so we can only deal with so much. But being able to recognize the signs and knowing to get them help early before it escalates into something worse. And that's a big thing right now is, this past year, there was actually more suicides and first responders and firefighters than there were actually line of duty deaths. So it's a huge thing that we're dealing with right now.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so this is posted as and is a 40-hour-a-week position with the expectation that the chief will work a traditional work week. How will you balance that with any other obligations you may have professionally?
So professionally, I've expressed this to numerous people, and including my fire chief in Amherst. If I were fortunate enough to be offered the job, this will be my full-time job. I do not have any intention of staying with the Amherst Fire Department if I was offered this. So my work week is Monday through Friday. Currently, I'll throw it out there. I had planned a 7:30 to 3:30 day, so it gives me a little bit of time to see my daughter in the morning, and then I'm home shortly after she gets out of school. Professional, the only other thing that I kind of have working right now is I'm starting umpire school in a week. So it's just an interest I've had for a long time. But professionally, this would become my full-time job. I don't have anything else as a full-time. I do work part-time as an instructor for the Mass Fire Academy. But that is something that typically happens, a couple nights a week, an occasional weekend, things like that. But if I wasn't going to be around, I would also make sure that I leave one of the deputies in charge or a captain in charge. So there's always going to be somebody available and around if I happen to not be in town. But the work week is Monday through Friday, the 40 hours or whatever it needs to be to accomplish the job. I mean, if it's 50, it's 50. That's part of the job. You have to do it. But this will be my only job. I will be resigning from the Amherst Fire Department if I were to get this job.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
very much. Last question, you made it, almost made it. Is there anything else you would like to share with us, or do you have any questions for us?
I feel I'm in a somewhat unique position, being that I'm already on the department and I know a lot about what's going on. I know a lot about what takes place in the budget part of things and where we are. So at this time, I don't have anything specific to ask. I believe, I'm sure that you all got a chance to look at my resume and my letter, so you're aware of what my credentials are. At this time, I don't have anything else to add to that. I think everything is kind of self-explanatory, so I don't really have anything extra than what's already on paper, or because you folks do kind of know me, what you know about me. But I moved to town. I came to join the department because I thought I wanted to give back to the community, and it grabbed me. I stuck with it, and then I turned it into my career, and I love doing it. I mean, the fact that I fill out things, and my hobby is, well, what's your job? Firefighting. What's your hobby? Teaching firefighting. People look at me strange sometimes because it's kind of what I do. I mean, I read the magazines. Everything is kind of revolving around the fire service for me, and it has for a number of years now. So,
Well, thank you very much. I guess, and I said this to the last can too, are you sure there's nothing else you want to say? While we're here, because, were there any questions that you wanted to either expand upon that we already asked you, or something you wish we had asked that you would like us to know, or the public? Totally up to you. It's not a pressure thing. I just, just want to give you the.
Minutes. We want to make
I just
sure
want to give you the opportunity for something that we might not have touched on. And we did try to go around to different facets of the fire chief position, whether it was the firefighting part, the capital planning part, the paramedic part. So, really, Bob, if there was anything else you just wanted to put out there, that's fine. If not, that's okay too.
I would say the only thing is, and again, I think it goes to that there's a lot of people in public in general across the country that don't necessarily know what firefighters do, cops do, EMTs do. They see the equipment moving up and down the road, but they don't necessarily know what the ins and outs are of what's going on in the back of the ambulance or what that fire truck is going to. It could be the 5th call of the day to the same address, but realizing that on the 6th time it could be the house fire. So the mindset of those folks that are in the apparatus or the ambulance or the cruiser, realizing that this is our job. And I think everybody should realize that, specifically here, because of the unique department that we have, that this is certainly not to take anything away from other department heads, but some of the other department heads are more of administrative. Where this one is very much an operational. They're going to be riding the fire truck, they're going to be riding the ambulance, they're in the schools, they're doing things. It is not just a sitting behind the desk job and doing budgets. That this person, no matter who it is, they're out there, and at any given time they have to do the exact same job that the brand new firefighter is. If they have to pull hose lines, that's part of it. They don't get the luxury of standing back if there's only 2 or 3 people on that call. So. And it's happened. People work sometimes there's only 2 or 3 people, and if one of them's the chief, guess what?
Right.
You're going to go to work. You don't just get to stand outside and kind of get the glory side of it. You have to get dirty and do all parts of it.
Good
Right,
point.
nicely said.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so, so thank you very much.
Yes.
you.
Thank
That
you.
concludes the interview. We're going to be meeting tomorrow, and we'll have a decision tomorrow evening, and I'll be reaching out to you. I and/or Marlene will be reaching out to you and the other candidate, just, with the way forward.
Okay,
Okay?
sounds great.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Awesome.
everybody's time.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was a good process. I like
Yeah.
it. It was good.
Good. I'm glad you feel that way.
It was longer, but the process itself was really good.
Yeah. Good.
Very
We
fluid.
had a good search
Great.
committee.
Thank you.
Yes, good group that was on there and
Yeah.
across all facets of it, so it was worked out well.
That's the other thing we want. I touched upon that earlier, but yeah, and that's what you want, varied backgrounds, vast backgrounds. So great. Thank you again.
Great.
So that's going to do it for the interview. So I'd like to thank John for
Thank you, John.
for taping this, and hope people get a chance to see it and see the candidates, both of whom are very qualified. So thank you very much.
Thank you.